All right. So again, Maggie, many, many, many thanks for sharing this from Pinterest. And when
No problem.
video, I am going to give credit to the lady who is the one who shared the video for a card that is very similar to this. She did a couple things a little differently. I think it's only the right thing to do when you use an idea that you give credit to the person who really inspired you.
Yes.
Fun fold, and it's very fun. It's pretty quick. Beautiful front that you can decorate in many different ways. And then the inside also has complimentary paper and stamps and just a really, really pretty. And I'm just going to jump in and we're going to kind of do this. And as we go, we will make the card together. I am using the garden green as the backdrop of my card. It is cut to 5.5 wide by 8.5 long. And I am going to score that right in the middle on the 8.5 inch side. So that would be at 4 1/4. And at this point, I am what would be an actual A2 size card. So nothing special, nothing different, just putting a nice crease right down the middle. And then on what will be the front of the card, which is going to be this side, I'm going to flip this over. I like to have the bump of my crease on the inside of where I fold. And I'm going to score this at 1 inch. So I put my paper over to the 1 inch line and I scored that at 1 inch. So let me take this out. And this is going to be the base of the card at 4 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead and fold this at 4 1/4 and give it a nice burnish with my bone folder. And then where I have that other score line at the 1 inch, this is the front of my card. And I'm going to fold that back toward me and give that a nice burnish. That's where we get the fun fold from the card. So let's just take a look at where we are so far and where the finished card is. And what we've created with that fold is where, in the example, the piece of the bumblebee cardstock, DSP, excuse me, is going to go. And then you're going to have a little area where you're going to see another piece of designer series paper. There's a lot of designer series paper that's used in this. So let's look at the pieces and just talk about the sizes of those pieces. For the flaps, I don't know if we'd want to call them flaps necessarily, but for the two areas where we're going to highlight the edges of the card, the front part of the card, these are two pieces of designer series paper that were picked because they work together well. Each of these is cut to 5 3/8 by 7/8 wide. And here's the reason. When we think about what the dimension of this is, we've got 5.5 by 1 inch. Well, 5.5 is 5 4/8. So if we take off an 8, we're going to have a little bit of a border on the top and the bottom. This is 1 inch or 8/8. If we take off an 1/8, we're going to get to 7/8. So we're going to have the same border all the way around, which is going to show off that cardstock underneath. Same thing over here. So those are two of the pieces. Then we also have some designer series paper that will go on the front of the card. It's going to go underneath that fold. And it's going to go on the inside of the card. And it is going to fit here as well. This section and the front section are the same size because both of them have 1 inch that's been taken away by that fold. These pieces are 5 3/8 high, same height as the smaller pieces, and they're 3 1/8 inch wide. And the way that I'm going to start this card, I am going to put the designer series paper down. And the pieces that I've chosen come from 2 different collections of designer series paper. One is from the Poinsettia designer series paper in the Poinsettia Place Suite. And it includes, as you can see, since I flipped over this piece, it includes the green filigree, and it also includes the poinsettia on the other side. When you glue these down, pause for 2 seconds and make sure that you have the design and the orientation that you want. This is the front of the card, and I am looking at it as if I would be opening the card. So I'm just making sure that those flowers are oriented in the direction that I want. I can now glue this down because that piece is going to get glued on top. And I'm just going to make sure that I get over to the edge just a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and glue that piece down. And now I can put my bumblebee piece on this flap. This is from the 6x6 in color designer series paper collection. It is a lot of fun. The 5 in colors that we have right now have several pieces and designs, double-sided, that come in that collection. I think you get 48 pieces, and they're super, super useful. So I'm just going to put the bumblebee piece right on that flap, and I'm going to try to align the top and the bottom with the piece that I put on for the poinsettia. And I'm not going to talk badly about myself if I don't get it completely where I want it. The bumblebee is in the middle of the flower, so it's pulling out that color. Then we can move to the inside. And let's just again take a peek at the inside of the finished card. We have the same poinsettia paper that we had on the front, and we also have one more piece of designer series paper on the outside edge. So we're going to go ahead and put those down. What I like about this card, well, I like so many things about this card. It is really pretty. It is pretty easy to put together. And Lord knows that many, many, many of us have way too much designer series paper that we tend not to want to cut. And this kind of card gives us no excuse to hoard it. It really is a great card to make, to be able to use up our stashes of paper and make some absolutely beautiful cards to send to family and friends. All right, the last piece of designer series paper that I need to put down is my other piece over here on the right. Again, I'm just going to open this up to show you where we are versus where we're going. And I'm going to glue that one down as well. And I purposely chose 2 of the patterns from the Poinsettia Place designer series paper because I know the colors are going to go together incredibly well. We have some garden green, we have some old olive, and also the bumblebee, which I just knew would work. And I'm going to close that front flap when I'm putting this piece down, just so I can, again, try to mirror where those lines are and try to get it as close as I can. I'm not going to say anything bad about myself. So I've got my designer series paper attached. The pieces that we have not yet put in or finished, let's take a look at the middle first. We have a panel that can be added for writing can be added after you put some stamped sentiments. You can also leave that panel out. You don't need to add anything. You could very easily put your message in here. I think this is really nice, and it's fun to kind of do some fun stamping to complement the design that you might have in the papers that you choose. And it's also a nice place to put a sentiment. What I decided to do to pull out a couple of the colors in the designer series paper, I used one of the stamps from the gorgeous Poinsettia Petals stamp set, and I'll pull that out in a minute. And I used Old Olive on this because I can get some of the Old Olive color from the paper. Then I used another one of the stamps, Merry Christmas, and I stamped that in Garden Green. So again, I could pull out some of the color in the paper. And I have cheated because I have already set up my stamps in my Stamparatus. And I am using a piece of Very Vanilla. It, I think, goes really well with the designer series paper. First of all, I pulled out a piece of white, and then I decided that I wanted to make it just a little bit darker. So I have my piece of vanilla that I am going to put in here. I've got my sentiments set up, and I just want to get that kind of aligned where I want it to be. And I know I would be lost now if I tried to stamp without the Stamparatus. That's a very embarrassing thing to say, but I will admit it because I am among friends, and it just is a perfect way to make sure that you get the image that you want. So I'm going to start, I'm just going to put that Merry Christmas at the top of my paper. And again, I'm using the Garden Green. This is an old pad, an ink pad. It has survived the war of my craft room for a while. And this is just a beautiful color to use for the holidays, I think. It is a really clean green, definitely invokes gardening and the beautiful colors that you can get from your garden. So just a really, really pretty green. And this piece of paper is cut to the same size that I cut the two pieces of designer series paper from the Poinsettia Place. And again, this measures 3 1/8 by 5 3/8 because we're going to be filling in the part of the middle on the card, and this is the perfect size to do that. Then I am going to move my Stamparatus over, and I also have the Poinsettia stamp. This is the one that has the full flower. There are several that have layers of the flower, but the one I'm choosing is the one that has the full flower. And I am going to stamp that in Old Olive versus the Garden Green, because again, I want to pull in a couple different colors from the designer series paper. And the ink pad that I'm using for this one is definitely more juicy. It is one of the newer ink pads. And what I'm going to do on this one is I don't want the Old Olive to be really, really strong on this particular part of my card. So I am going to take a piece of scrap paper and I'm going to stamp off first. I don't want the full color to go onto that bottom part of the panel that I'm going to put in. So I'm just stamping this off. I want to get a little bit of that ink off. And then I'm going to come back in. I'm not going to re-ink. I'm going to come back in and I'm going to stamp that corner. And for me, that's enough. Now, if I wanted to, and I will show you this, I can re-ink this. I'm going to re-ink the stamp. I'm stamping it a little bit off camera, but I'm going to re-ink that stamp. And I'm going to stamp it off one more time. Just take off that really rich color. And then I'll come back with my second generation. And that way I get just a tad of a fuller image. But you can see that there are two greens on this. And I just think that really adds some interest to this particular piece. So now I'm ready to put that into the middle of my card. And it is simple enough. It is just the same as what we've done to this point. I am going to get some liquid glue. I was teasing yesterday when I was working with some other folks on cards, saying that I really should have purchased stock in whatever company makes Tombow, because I use it all the time. I will admit that it took me a little bit to convert to Tombow. I was more in the, believe it or not, the old glue stick world. But once I figured out that this was the better way to go, there's no looking back. So again, I am turning this and I'm doing my best, not saying bad things about myself even now, of trying to get these lined up as best as I can. And you can see that this piece fits perfectly into that area. So now I have the inside of the card done. From the outside, the front, let's just check in and see what we have left to do. We need to build our poinsettia, and there are a couple of different dies that I used to create this. And then I'm going to put a sentiment on the bottom. I'm just going to talk about what I did for the sentiment. I used the stamp that comes from the poinsettia petals. It's the one that says warm wishes from our home to yours. I stamped that in garden green. And then I used one of the dies from the Stitched Shapes framelits. These are awesome. I'm surprised mine haven't broken because I've used them so much. But I used the second smallest oval to cut that out. And I cheated. I already did that ahead of time because I don't think you really need to watch me cut this out. You all know how to do die cutting. But again, I wanted to use some different greens on this card to really pull out the different greens in the paper. The poinsettia. The poinsettia was created with the absolutely amazing poinsettia dies. And let's just take a minute to look at a couple of these. I have already cut out my pieces, so you're not going to have to watch me crank them through the die cutting machine. But the two that I used were the middle size for the poinsettia and the small. And you can see what the results are. I used very vanilla. So here's the middle and here's the small. And you can probably see that there are some gorgeous embossed images in this as well. They just do an amazing, amazing job. When you put these through your die cutting machine, you want to put the two dies in together. The easiest way to do that is to use a little bit of washi tape and just hold them together. You're also going to notice that the petals are not the same shape. So this is a little jigsaw puzzle. When you take the two pieces apart, you just have to fit them so they actually fit together. Not difficult at all. But you're going to end up with two of the petals. Then I also used the 2 sizes of leaves. So you've got this size and this size, the smaller and the larger. And I used old olive cardstock to cut these. Again, I thought, bringing in some different greens would be really fun. There's one more die that I used for some of the bling, and it is this sprig. I don't know, I'm going to call it a sprig, but it's this die right here. And the image that it cuts out is just fun. I use some of the brushed metallic cardstock to cut these out, and I chose to cut out 3. I definitely use scissors to cut different parts of these when I put everything together in the final design. But those are the die cuts that I used. And one thing that I decided to do on the flower and the leaves was I wanted to add just a little more color. And since I did that, I was reading a blog, I guess it was, a little bit earlier. And I went down the rabbit hole of Pinterest, and I saw a really pretty card that had some of the poinsettia pieces cut out. And the veining on the flowers and the leaves were very, very dark. They were really easy to see. Well, what I learned was that one thing you can do is you can actually put Versamark on the dies, on the part that has the embossing edge. And when you run them through your die cutting machine, that Versamark is going to go into the creases and make the embossed area darker. So just one way to do this. But what I did is I decided I wanted to add a little color. And if I bring back the finished card, you can see that I put a little bit of old olive on the petals, and I also put some onto the leaves. I wanted to mimic the way that the poinsettias on the paper look. They have a little bit of an old olive in some of those leaves. And if you think about, a real poinsettia, they definitely have some colors in their leaves. I decided to use an ink blending brush, and I'm going to do this kind of quick. And I just brought it in and sort of messed around. I put some ink onto a block, and I just added some color. And this is a nice to have. You definitely don't necessarily need to do this because the leaves and the flowers are really going to look pretty regardless of the addition on the ink. And you could do some fun things with this. If you have the very vanilla cardstock and you cut that so you have some of the petals, think about some of the really pretty light poinsettia plants that you've seen that have hints of maybe pinks, or I won't say orange, but maybe a coral. You could bring those into the petals as well and just give them a really natural, beautiful addition as far as the color. And I'm concentrating more on the outside of these leaves, the part that will be visible. I don't need to worry about the part that will be hidden under the petals because nobody's going to see that. So again, just doing this kind of fast. It's a very subtle touch, and if you're not looking for it, you're really not going to see it all that much. You can tell I didn't re-ink my brush, and I did go back in and put some color on the poinsettias, petals, and again, I'm just doing a little bit. I think a little bit on this is enough. It's just going to give it a definition. It also helps pop out the veins in the leaves so that you can see them just a little bit more. And I also think it's kind of natural looking if you don't make each petal look the same. Some are going to have more color than others. and you just kind of want to add a little bit. You could stack this poinsettia even more. There's one more die. There's a bigger die for the actual petals, and you can make it a 3-layer. Or you could die cut a couple more of either of the sizes that I die cut and offset them and make them, you know, again, 2 or 3 different levels. So that's what I'm going to do on this. And I am just going to let that go. And now I'm going to put my flower together. And what I like to do with these kinds of flowers is give them just a little bit of a depth. So if you grab your bone folder, be careful with this, because if you over curl these, you may take out some of the veining in the leaves that's been embossed. And you kind of want it, you want to pull those petals back towards you a little bit. You can even bend some of the leaves so that they pop up rather than go down, just so it's a little bit more interesting. Same thing on the larger petals. You could also take a brush and kind of outline the petals and give them a little bit more definition and color on the outside if you wanted to. It's really what makes you happy. And then I just put these together where I put a little glue on the bigger of the two. And one thing that I like to not do is get these perfectly aligned. Like, I'm not going to put it like that where it looks like it's purposeful and intentional. I'm going to offset it a little bit. To me, that looks a little bit more realistic. And then I have my petals or my leaves. And what I like to do is I like to get the card out and figure out where I'm going to put the leaves before I commit to putting them down. And I thought it was kind of fun to bring, you know, one of them sort of over to the edge and maybe have it hang off just a tad. And again, this is how you want your card to look, how you want everything to kind of fit. And then I'm going to put a little bit of that glue on the bottom part of where that leaf is going to attach. I'm going to bring my flower back in so that I can make sure that I know what it is that I thought I would do. And then push that down. That didn't work well. So when it doesn't work well, you do plan B and pick it up. And just get that attached right there. Then you can come back in and figure out where you want the second one to go. So I'll put some glue right on the bottom of that leaf and kind of hover over that leaf and figure out where I want it to be. There, that worked. And have that one attached. And then that third leaf, I'm going to bring it kind of like that. And bring my flower back in, pop that down. And get that attached. And then sometimes what I'll do for these, I've got a layer of glue on there, but if I really want to be sure that they're going to just stay where they need to be, I'm going to put a little bit of tape. And that's not going to hurt anything. And it really shouldn't be visible if I make sure that it is hidden from the back. And it's one more piece of stability. So there I have my poinsettia, and I'm going to go ahead and put that down. Now I'm going to get my sentiment out to make sure that I have enough room on the card so I can get this placed where I want it to be. And remember, we still have these sprigs that we're going to be putting down. So I think that's pretty good. I'm going to leave that right there and grab some more glue. I found that when you put glue on top of tape, it's fine. It's not going to cause any issues as far as adhering. That's the way I want it. And it will hold it just fine. So I'm going to bring that about, that's good enough, right there. And that's where I'm going to have my poinsettia. Then I can play around with these lovely little sprigs. And these are just darn fun. And what's really nice about them is they lend themselves to getting cut. So you can use pieces of them on different parts of the card. And you can figure out where you want them to go. And if you're lucky enough, you're going to find that you've got some glue that's still kind of wet underneath that you can actually attach them to. I'm just going to kind of place these around first and see what I want to do with them. And if I have my sentiment down here, which I will put on in just a second, and I'm going to use dimensionals for the sentiment. I think it's really fun to have one of these, and I do have glue back there still. That kind of comes down to where the sentiment is. And I can make sure, yep, that glue is going to hold it. So I've got some glue back there. And I'll show you one other thing that I'll do with these in just a minute. And I am just having fun putting my little bling where I want my bling to go. And I've got two more of these little pieces. They're going to look really nice. Kind of popping in over here. So I may leave those like that. And this is where I kind of pause and figure out what it is that I want to do. What I will do when I know exactly where I want my bling to go, and once the flowers have dried just a tad, I will take some glue dots. And I'm going to take a glue dot and I'm going to put it up underneath one of my petals. And then I can push that down, and that is going to attach the fronds underneath, and it will keep them nice and in place. So for example, if I take this glue dot, which is still on the piece of acetate, and I put that on the back of that petal, and then I push down, this frond is going nowhere. It is now glued to that petal. And it's a very easy way to get these positioned where you want them to go. And these glue dots are ones that I have kept from paper pumpkin kits. And they come in super handy because they're really great to get into areas where you may need to tuck things under each other. Even, that would be kind of cute too, with that frond showing as popping out from the corner. I'm not going to futz around with this too much more because you get the idea. But I'll just do one more. I'm just going to get my glue dot exposed on that piece of acetate. I am going to pop it underneath and put it onto that petal. And then I'm going to bring in my little piece that I want to tuck up underneath here. pop it down, and that is not moving. That is hanging out right there. So that's how I will end up finishing those particular pieces. Then I am going to use dimensionals to put my greeting on. I'll bring those dimensionals over in just a second. But I think the most gorgeous embellishment on this card is the middle of the poinsettia. These are the beaded pearls that come with the Poinsettia Suite. And when you add these to the middle of the flower, it just pops. It does an amazing job. Again, these are dimensionals that I saved from a paper pumpkin project. And I'm just putting one on the back of one of these beaded pearls. You can use any size that you have of the glue dots. They will work fine. You can double them up if you want to. And you can just pop one of them on, and it will hold that flower or the beaded piece in place really, really well. And then to finish up the sentiment, again, some of these little frowns are not quite attached yet, but they will be shortly. I am going to use some dimensionals. You can tell that when I first stamped the greeting that I am putting on the front of the card, I wasn't completely thrilled with the way that the stamp inked the greeting. So I turned it over and started again. And so I got invented paper with two sides, so we can turn it over. So I'm just adding my sentiment with a couple of dimensionals, and as usual, putting a dimensional or two in the middle so my sentiment does not sag. And then what I'm going to do for this sentiment is I'm going to try and center it in this area up to the edge of the front of the card that we'll be opening. And again, I'm not going to say bad things about myself if I don't get it completely where I want it to go or completely straight. So let's take a look at these. The one on the left is the original card. The one on the right is the one that we just did. Very similar, but the bling is definitely going to be different card to card. And we know that I haven't put all this down yet. There's still pieces like that one and these that I have not attached with glue dots. So I still have the ability to move some of this around and figure out exactly where I want it to go. I may want to add some down here. I still haven't quite decided. But for all intent and purpose, that is the way that this card is made. And I really think that the possibilities of this are endless. You know, it's gorgeous for a holiday card, but a birthday card, a condolence card, thinking of you, I could just go on and on. Pretty much any kind of card can be done. The key, in my opinion, is picking out some designer series paper that really goes together well, and then choosing some embellishments that, if you can, correspond to your paper, have some 3D effect on the front, and the sky is the limit. So I hope you've enjoyed this. And when I do post the video, I will give credit to the lady who inspired this card. She definitely needs to get the credit for it. But for now, that's it. So enjoy.